On today's episode, I suffocate a tank and make a mess. So here we have it, ladies and gents, time to make the diorama. Had a fairly in-depth look at some other reference photos, colorized photos of Stalingrad to get an idea of atmosphere, colours, etc. I knew that I couldn't get the entirety of that original photo in, so I thought I'd try and get the general idea of what it was that that image showed. That knocked out KV1 surrounded by these big looming Soviet apartment blocks. Started with placing out some ideas of, you know, where I wanted the bits and pieces, and then started cutting out a rough shape of a ruined part of an apartment block. I then covered that with polyfiller to give you more of a concrete texture. It's also going to protect that foam from when I spray it with a rattle can before I go into painting or using the enamels or anything like that. I then kind of roughly flat it off, still keeping some of the texture, and I use paper clips to kind of imitate some concrete rebar that would have been in some of the buildings where bits have been shot off, parts of it have collapsed, etc, etc. Make a quick concrete windowsill out of some box section plastic card that I found, just to kind of add a little bit more detail. In hindsight, I probably should have used some Tamiya putty thinned down just to give it a little bit more of a kind of concrete texture. I then use some of Geek Gaming Scenics modelling compound to give me the basic landform that I'm after around there. So some piles of mud and dirt. This stuff's great. Literally, it's paper and plaster mixed together. You mix it with water and then you can kind of form it how you want, and as it dries you can still kind of shape it. Then add some more bits of foam to kind of make it look like that building's collapsed a little more, and kind of covered some of that pavement that I scribed in using some thin foam sheet. Then go back and get the kind of rough placement of where I wanted the tank in the first place, because obviously I've covered up any markings that I've made. And I also added a little bit of plastic card in there of those box sections, just to kind of add a little bit more detail to the scene. I then put it in a plastic bag so I don't get wet plaster all over the tank, and kind of push it in so I get a bit of a track mark, and I get a bit of a sunken area where the tank will stick. I then use those horrible plastic tracks to get that track indentation in as well. add a little more interest to the scene, I go back through, I add some, I think they're Field of Glory rubble bricks and bits of wood, just kind of city rubble, could be floorboards, blown up furniture, etc., just to kind of give that ruined vibe. It'll also allow a little bit of variation in colour, because otherwise this will be a very, very, very grey diorama. Again, back with the Geek Gaming Scenic stuff, I add some quick drying base glue, blend that in, and it's going to I'm going to use some of their base ready range just to blend in some places where the bricks kind of look like they're floating out of the rubble, add a little more texture. And again, give a little more depth to the scene. A little more realism. When I go on to the painting, first thing I do is I paint the building in a cheap grey acrylic paint, and then water that down, add some black into it, and give it a really, really, really heavy wash to bring out some of the texture of those concrete areas. Excuse the state of my desk, I know it's a mess. And then go back over that and dry brush it with a higher colour after that's all dried. I essentially repeat the same process with the groundwork as well. I go in with a brown, fairly watered down, mix that up with a bit of grey, but I realised that the terrain was looking really flat, so I added in some ochre to kind of lighten it up, because looking at some of those reference photos that I used, very, very, very sandy soil that I wanted to try and emulate, at least to an extent. Again, it brought in a nice contrast. I dry brushed a lot of that on kind of raised areas just to add some variation and some interest to the terrain. I then go back through, I pick out some of those wood details, some of the bricks, and some various different reds, browns. And then any of the steel girders that I've got sticking out, I apply some enamel rust washes to make them look I then apply some enamel rust washes to those metal girders, the rebar that's sticking out, so they look like they've been sat there for quite a while. I also add a little bit of streaking as well, where it's rained and the rust has kind of run down the front of that building, and some pigments to the window where it looks burnt out, like it's burnt out from the inside before it's collapsed. And then yeah, to tie it all together, because I use that base ready as a texture on the tank, I've then added some more on that, just neat on top. Again, adding a little more depth and variety, and where I've glued it down, I've added a little bit over the sides of the tracks, because even though I did push it in fairly firmly, because the plastic's so light, it did look a little floaty. So to kind of hide that to an extent, I have kind of put a bit of that base ready around the tracks to kind of hide where it's a little raised up. I think I put the mound on the left hand side was a little high, so it was at a bit of a weird angle. So there it is, my first diorama on YouTube. I really hope you like it. I'm very, very pleased with it. There's things I do differently, but this is a game about improvement, and that's what I'm hoping to do. Give us a like, give us a subscribe if you're enjoying this. Next one coming out, I'll be going back to my roots, be looking at some 40k. Painting up a Land Raider Spartan, and then we're going to move on to a small vignette without any armour, but with some figures from Escape from Tarkov. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.